All right, so look, you're a finance pro, right? We both know you don't have time for fluff.
So today's deep dive, word express. Two big things happening in finance, both just days before what could be a crazy election week. So first, we've got this OCC memo hitting everybody's inboxes. And then things are heating up on Reddit, the RGME and our Superstonk crowds, talking about Chewy, of all things. But here's the thing. I think there might be a little more to this than meets the eye.
Yeah, the timing is definitely interesting for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So first, that OCC memo, straight from the Options Clearing Corporation, November 1st, 2024. Basically reminding everyone about margin calls, which whatever, right? Happens all the time. But this time, it's the timing. Right before the election on the 5th. That makes it a little more than just a routine reminder.
Yeah, it feels like they're
sending a signal
that they're expecting some real market volatility. For sure. And they're not playing around either. You know the memo says. The OCC can issue intraday margin calls, like whenever they want, anytime, if it accounts losses, go over 50% of their total risk charges. Yeah. So we're talking minimum margin call of $500,000. And you only get 60 minutes to meet it. So yeah,
while you're busy figuring out how the election's going to impact things, don't forget to keep an eye on how much risk you've got in your own portfolio.
Couldn't agree more. Now is not the time to get complacent.
Definitely not. Okay, so now for the second thing. That's got those Reddit communities all fired up. Chewy's getting bumped up
to the S&P Midcap 400 on November 6th of 2024. Sounds like good news for them, right? But here's where it gets a little weird. All those index funds tracking the S&P Midcap 400. They're going to have to buy Chewy stock, which is going to create some serious buying pressure. I mean, Perplexity.ai, that AI tool that a lot of finance folks use, they estimate this could mean millions, maybe even tens of millions of dollars flowing into Chewy.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. And what's really got people thinking is what this could all mean, especially considering the connection between Chewy and GameStop. They both have ties to that investor, Ryan Cohen.
Right, yeah. Okay, so we've got the OCC talking about margin calls. And then Chewy stock is about to get a big boost. But they're both connected to Ryan Cohen. Interesting.
It is interesting. And that's where it gets
interesting.
Yeah, and that's where things start to get really interesting, right? Because that OCC memo, it's warning about all this market volatility around the election. And what happens if a stock that's heavily shorted, like let's say GME, sees a big price jump out of nowhere?
Oh, so you're thinking margin calls everywhere.
Exactly. And when those margin calls hit, you're going to need a lot of cash, and you're going to need it fast.
Okay, so now I see where you're going with this. You're thinking this whole Chewy thing with all this buying pressure coming from those index funds.
Yeah.
That could be a way for someone to free up a ton of cash really quickly.
That's one way to look at it. Think about it like this. What if someone out there needs a lot of cash and they need it now to cover some losses somewhere else? Well, creating a buying frenzy in a stock that's related. That's one way to do it.
So you're saying someone might be using this whole Chewy S&P thing to get their hands on some cash just in case things get a little crazy with GME when the election hits.
It's definitely something to consider. I mean, the timing is just too perfect. And the implications, well, they could be huge, especially for someone like you, someone who needs to stay ahead of the curve, who needs to know what's coming.
This is like a game of financial chess or something. Everyone making their moves, trying to figure out what the other guy's going to do next. And sometimes these things seem completely random, but they turn out to be connected in ways you never would have guessed.
Exactly. And the people who can see those connections, the ones who can put the pieces together, those are the ones who are going to win. They're the ones who are going to come out on top.
This is fascinating stuff. I'm really curious to hear what our listeners think about all of this. Do you see this connection, too, between this OCC memo and Chewy and GME? Does it change how you look at these events? Or maybe you're seeing other connections, things we haven't even talked about.
And that's important to remember. The market, it's all connected. You can't just focus on one little piece. You got to see the whole picture.
No.
Understand how everything fits together. That's how you stay ahead.
Okay, so we've got all this stuff happening, right? Election volatility, this memo from the OCC warning about margin calls, and then you've got Chewy's stock about to jump. But what does it all mean for our listeners? You know the people out there in the trenches every day making the big decisions.
I think the big takeaway here is that the market is all connected. You can't just look at one stock or one sector in isolation. You got to see the whole picture.
You can't just ignore the big picture, right? You've got to factor in everything, the regulations, what's happening in the world, the things you can't predict. It's all connected. And this isn't just some theoretical stuff we're talking about here. This is real money, real risk, real opportunity for people. So let's say this link between the OCC memo and GME and Chewy, let's say it all plays out like we've been talking about. What happens next? What else should people be watching out for?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? The million-dollar question. I mean, are there other stocks out there that are heavily shorted that could see the same kind of price action? What about sectors that are going to be impacted by whoever wins the election?
Like you said before, it's all a big chess game.
Yeah.
But it's like you're playing on a dozen boards at the same time. You've got to see all the pieces, all the moves, all the possibilities.
And the best players.
Yeah.
The ones who really win. They're not just reacting to the moves other people are making. They're already thinking 5 steps ahead. They're anticipating what's going to happen, and they're positioning themselves to take advantage.
So as we head into election week with all this craziness about to go down, keep your eyes open, stay sharp. Remember, the smallest thing can set off a chain reaction. And that's what we do here, right? We look for those small things. Stay curious and keep diving deep